I have a bit of a personal bias here because I'm from Tampa, but today I would like to talk about what I believe are some of the best zoological exhibits within the United States. Now of course I'm no stranger to this, as in the past I've covered Gatorland, as well as sung the praises about the various exhibits you can find throughout Disney's Animal Kingdom and SeaWorld Orlando. Looking back to Tampa, I've had a lot of positive things to say about the animal exhibits at Busch Gardens as well. It's a great park with an excellent coaster lineup that blends together seamlessly with the various African animals. I have expressed a lot of criticism for how the park is managed, but if you're looking for just high quality exhibits, I highly recommend visiting because they are well taken care of. Still, I've been to a fair number of aquariums and zoos outside of Florida and have definitely been surprised at how low quality they were. Having grown up with places like the Florida Aquarium or ZooTampa, which was formerly known as Lowry Park Zoo, I was surprised to see how poorly kept other parks were, both with their animal exhibits and in the visitor areas. I'm not saying that I haven't been to excellent exhibits outside of Florida, but when you grow up in a place like Tampa, you don't realize that it's the exception and not the norm. What makes these Tampa attractions so interesting is just not how high quality they are, but also that they go above and beyond in trying to theme their various exhibits. If you're a tourist visiting Florida, Orlando obviously has a lot to offer, but I'm incredibly partial to Tampa as well because of this reason. So let's take a look at what are arguably some of the best zoological exhibits in the United States, not just in quality, but in theming as well. Located in downtown Tampa, right on the bay and nestled in between cruise ports, the Florida Aquarium is easily one of the largest I've ever experienced. With this being said, I'm sure that people are also going to try recommending the Georgia Aquarium as well, but I've already been there and I'll definitely acknowledge that it's a high quality exhibit. However, the Florida Aquarium is still a standout experience. On entering the lobby, most people will typically take the escalator up, but if you stop to your right, you'll see the Moon Bay. This little exhibit is relatively new and allows you to reach into the water and gently pet the top of jellyfish. The moon jellies on display here are safe to touch, as if you accidentally manage to brush one of their tentacles, their sting isn't strong enough to penetrate most human skin. I'm not sure how unique this is to the Florida Aquarium, but the ability to touch a jellyfish isn't something I've seen anywhere else. Once you move on, most people will typically go upstairs, where you'll be met with the wetlands of Florida. This area's theme is pretty self-explanatory, covering animals such as wading birds and various fish that you can find throughout Florida's swamps and mangrove forests. Notable here is the inclusion of Florida river otters and reptiles such as alligators. The Florida Aquarium also contains exhibits for invasive species as well, such as the python you see here, emphasizing the destruction that they cause to local ecosystems. What's neat about the wetlands area is just how open most of the exhibits are. All of the birds are free to travel and go where they please, and you can get great views of the aquatic life from both above and below. However, before you leave this area, a Madagascar-themed trail above can be explored. It is a bit strange that this area exists, as the aquarium itself is so focused on Florida wildlife, but it's still a nice diversion. Going up the stairs, you can obviously see a number of exhibits focused on the wildlife from the island, including various lizards, local marine life, and one of my personal favorites, the tomato frogs. A small but fun novelty is also the glass floor, looking down into a tank in a different area of the aquarium. The highlight of the Madagascar area is of course the ring-tailed lemurs though. Coming downstairs and back to the Florida wetlands, the next area you'll move into is the shorelines, which again has a pretty obvious theme from the name. The first tank you will encounter is the one that you could look down into from above, and of course showcases fish from along Florida coasts. This area has quite a few exhibits to explore, although among the most interesting are going to be the spiny lobsters and the tank with a massive Goliath grouper. There are also some fun, smaller tanks that can be found in this section as well. Finally, the shorelines lead up to Stingray Beach, where you can witness aquarium staff feeding the rays, and at certain times of the day, you can pet them when allowed to do so. When exiting this area, you'll find yourself on the upper balcony of the lobby, where you'll notice another small interactive exhibit, allowing you to touch various invertebrates. Continuing forward, you'll enter the coral reef, still very much focused on Florida and its coral habitats. You'll of course encounter various species of fish, along with tiger and nurse sharks. Like with the python we previously saw, this area also highlights another invasive species, lionfish. Like with the other areas, there is of course plenty more to see, but this area will conclude with the largest tank in the aquarium, where you will also encounter educational demonstrations. Here you will find various sharks, rays, and even the occasional sea turtle. In a room adjacent to this area is a series of small reef exhibits that highlights both smaller, delicate fish and various seahorses. Moving forward, you'll encounter the last exhibit in the aquarium in an area known as the Waves of Wonder. Here, there's not really any unifying theme other than providing a kitchen sink of various exhibits. You're still going to find many fish and animals found near Florida, such as with this tank here. Another notable element is the 4 different tanks full of various jellyfish. Other exhibits will include various species found in the Pacific, and another tank is dedicated just to a Pacific octopus as well. Once you've exited this area, you've pretty much finished exploring all the animal exhibits. Now back down on the first floor of the lobby, you can choose to go outside where you'll get great views of the bay, but there is also a splash pad and playground for small children as well. Adjacent to the lobby though, and something that I thought was worth mentioning, is the restaurant. It would be easy for the Florida Aquarium to just get away with your typical fast food offerings, but I was really impressed by the scope of their menu and just how quickly the food came out. The offerings were also high quality, so it's definitely not a place to skip out on if you're hungry. While it may not be the largest in the United States, the Florida Aquarium is still quite sizable, offering more than enough to keep you entertained for 3 or 4 hours. It's also a pretty significant conservation institution, working to help various marine species, but with an emphasis on coral and sea turtles. The aquarium also focuses heavily on education, both through staff interacting with guests throughout the building and in designated show areas, but also through local schools and organizations as well. Overall, the Florida Aquarium is one of the strongest tourist attractions you can visit in Tampa, and it's one that I would highly recommend. We've now reached the point in the video where if you feel you've been interested this far into it, I would like to ask you to just simply leave a like. It's easy and helpful, allowing me to travel to more places and continue doing more videos like this. If you drive a little ways north of downtown Tampa though, you'll drive through Lowry Park and find yourself at ZooTampa. This is easily the best zoo I've ever had the opportunity to experience, and is another reason to go out of your way to visit the city. Its entrance is rather quaint, flanked by a gift shop and an eatery, centered around a manatee statue that doubles as a splash pad. To your right, one of the more prominent exhibits is going to be an aviary, which is large enough to walk through and offers an eclectic variety of interesting birds to view. Also near the entrance is the primate area, which also features quite a few different species as well. The day I went, the Angolan colobus were quite active, as were the siamang across the pathway. You can also find ring-tailed lemurs, mandrill, and smaller monkeys like the Bolivian great titi and the golden lion tamarins. However, the most notable primates of the day were the orangutans, who were defecating into their hands and throwing it at people on the pathway. Just to be clear, being able to witness this was not a negative experience at all. One notable element of ZooTampa is that it contains a few small rides that appeal to children. Past the primates, you'll find the park's carousel, which acts as a small hub area that leads to different themed areas of the park. One of these, Wallaroo Station, is focused on both Australian animals and catering to younger children. This area includes some splash pads and even small rides, such as the Tasmanian Tiger Coaster, which is definitely just using a stock East Asian tiger and not the extinct Australian marsupial. However, some of the more interesting animals are going to be the flying foxes, the wallabies, and the palm cockatoo. I should also mention the petting zoo of temperamental barnyard animals, including a goat that zoo staff informed me has learned to enjoy flipping over toddlers by headbutting them. If you continue to the carousel and make a left, you can also encounter a splashdown called Roaring Springs, though I assume it's probably down for refurbishment in the winter. From this area, you are then introduced to the Florida Wilds, a trail that has recently been rebranded and focuses heavily on Florida wildlife. Here, there's an emphasis on educating people how to live alongside animals that belong to local Florida ecosystems, and you'll get to view animals such as owls, tortoises, and of course, alligators. This trail is also notable for hosting black bears, which were hiding when I went to film them, as well as 3 Florida panthers. It did seem odd to me that this area includes flamingos as well, though I did do a bit of research and discovered that certain species were once native to Florida. The only animal that truly doesn't fit thematically is the red wolf, which is endangered and resides mostly in the Carolinas. However, their captivity is part of the zoo's effort to restore wild populations, so a little lapse in theming isn't anything to complain about. As you move further down the trail though, you'll see pools dedicated to rehabilitating manatees that were injured in the wild, and a large part of this trail goes into a building where you can view them underwater. Once you exit the building, you conclude this part of the trail with an exhibit dedicated to bald eagles. On your return back to the front of the zoo, you can choose to travel along another trail dedicated to animals from Asia. Highlights are going to be the Komodo dragon, the sun bear, and the Indian rhino. There were also a few interesting species here that I wasn't familiar with at all, such as these peculiar mammals called binturong, or this crocodilian with an interesting snout known as the Indian gharial. This trail also has an aviary that you can step into, themed to look like ruins, and also includes some small mammals and tortoises. If you return to the far side of the zoo, back to the carousel, there is also a tunnel that leads into an African-themed section. However, before you enter, it's easy to miss, but there's a fun exhibit dedicated to African penguins. Once you enter the African section though, you're going to get some great views of those animals as well. There's a lot of space where you'll get to see giraffes, African white rhinos, and of course, African elephants. One animal that I really like to see is the okapi, just because it's so strange and usually likes to hide, but other highlights are going to include birds such as the African hornbill and the shoebill stork. While there aren't any larger species of hippo in the zoo, I think that the pygmy hippo is worth a mention as well. While much of ZooTampa is themed really well, I would like to highlight how well done the Africa section is. It may not be Busch Gardens level of theming, but its animal exhibits are incorporated into these elements quite well. Also new for the park is an African safari. It doesn't quite achieve that level of theming that you would find at Kilimanjaro safaris in Animal Kingdom, but there is a loose storyline with some themed elements along the way. Mostly though, it's just an enjoyable truck ride along the perimeter of the African animal enclosures, allowing you to view them from a different perspective. Overall, ZooTampa is not just a great, well-maintained zoo, but makes the effort to stick in theming where appropriate. Like the Florida Aquarium, it also has a large emphasis on educating guests about the animals and the dangers that they face, working actively through conservation and animal management programs to help achieve those goals. Finally, it's just a really well-realized zoo with an enormous number of exhibits that go far beyond what I managed to talk about, easily outshining numerous other zoos that I've visited. Let me once again emphasize my bias, but I think that Tampa and the area surrounding the bay is a great place to visit if you're traveling to Florida. Orlando certainly has an overwhelming number of theme parks and entertainment, but you're going to find a lot of great stuff in Tampa as well. Despite my criticism for how SeaWorld parks are managed, Busch Gardens Tampa is going to be a highlight for its great lineup of coasters and well-themed areas. Its animal exhibits are also world-class and fit well into that theming, only further reinforcing Tampa as a great destination if you're interested in seeing and learning about animals from all over the world. Since this park isn't the topic of the video though, let me wrap up my thoughts on what I've discussed. Not only is the Florida Aquarium one of the larger ones that you can visit throughout the United States, but it's also extremely well maintained. Its focus on guest experience and unique exhibits with fantastic presentation is a highlight. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know that theming is extremely important to me, and so the aquarium is a great showcase of that as well. I've always found it interesting that despite its variety of exhibits like Madagascar, or its more eclectic collection of tanks, there is very much a unified theme and focus on Florida wildlife. It starts with the Florida wetlands, transitioning to the shallows. From the shallows, you can move across the lobby and into the coral reefs. It's a bit of a loose theme, but one that naturally guides you through the experience. I assume it's natural that Florida zoological exhibits would be focused on Florida ecosystems and animals though, as this is a pretty large aspect of ZooTampa as well. The various animals are great, and the manatees are always a highlight. Not only is the zoo well landscaped and a pleasant space overall, but the theming is what sets it apart from many other zoos I've visited. I'm sure that there are other themed zoos out there, but this is still a highlight of this particular attraction. The theming isn't always consistent, as in the African section of the park, you can find Galapagos tortoises right next to the Aldabra tortoises, but I think the zoo just has to do what it can with space management, just as with the red wolves mentioned earlier. It's also notable that while both the Florida Aquarium and ZooTampa have a large emphasis on education and conservation, they are also accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, an organization that recognizes high standards of animal care. So, this may not have been a more traditional theme park video, but I think that zoos and aquariums very much fit into the interests of theme park fans, and I thought that these were worth highlighting as places that you should visit. As always, if you made it to the end of the video and want to leave a like, that's pretty helpful in allowing my audience to grow. In addition, if you like content like this but have not yet hit the subscribe button with bell notification, you can do so to be alerted to new videos as they release.